never smoke the dizzy, but we can always share some ditsies. It's just a cup in time. This song doesn't have to rhyme. Life's all of us, not every moment we can be feeling fine. I wanna share a moment, just a second if you will, maybe even a cup of thrill. We could share this performance. It's tea time, come sit with me.
Well, welcome guys. Miss Liz is back, and that's right. And I have my second incredible male in the house tonight. On Tuesday, we had two incredible females, and tonight we had two males. So we're going to talk about mystery and thrillers and all of that good stuff tonight. But before we get started and spilling tea with Randy Weir, we're going to be sharing the disclaimer, the intro, all of that good stuff. But even before that, we're going to get you over to Miss Liz's YouTube channel, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikToks, all of those platforms, and give it a like, share, follow, all that good stuff, and get these tea times out one tea time at a time. It does make a difference. So let's get started with disclaimer, and let's get Randy in here. And tonight's tea is imaginative, independence, logical, or realistic. Realist. Miss Liz, your tongue. Turn those letters around. So the disclaimer for Miss Liz's Tea Time live show. Miss Liz's Tea Time is a global platform dedicated to sharing real life stories, diverse perspectives, and meaningful conversations that inspire awareness, healing, and connection. Miss Liz is going live using StreamYard. Before leaving a comment during the live broadcast, please grant StreamYard permission to display your name at StreamYard.com. Please be advised that all the content brought forward during any Tea Time show is presented in good faith. However, discussions may include opinions, beliefs, and perspectives that do not necessarily represent the views of Miss Liz or the Tea Time platform. Information shared by guests is based on their own experiences and is perceived to be accurate at the giving time of airing. All guests, viewers, and participants are responsible for using their own judgment when considering any action or decision that may relate to these discussions. Some episodes may cover sensitive topics, including but not limited to trauma, abuse, grief, mental health, and other emotionally triggering subjects. Listeners' and viewers' discretion is strongly advised. Tea Time with Miss Liz is an open discussion forum designed to offer insight, inspire awareness, and create connection. It is not a substitute for professional, medical, legal, or therapeutical advice. If you require professional support, please seek assistance from qualified professionals or trusted resources in your area. If you have questions regarding this disclaimer or the content of this discussion, you are welcome to contact me, aka Miss Liz, directly at my email at bookingmissliz@gmail.com or visit my linktree at Miss Liz's Tea Time. By choosing to participate in, comment on, or view these live shows, you acknowledge and accept this disclaimer. Your participation is entirely voluntary. Miss Liz welcomes you to join the conversations with an open heart, and if at any time you feel this platform is not right for you, I respect your wishes and decision and welcome you back whenever you are ready. Tea Time with Miss Liz is serving truth and awareness one cup at a time. Now let me give you a little bit on Randy. Well, tonight I'm pouring a special cup with Randy Weir, a talented mystery author and creative storyteller whose imagination keeps readers turning pages long after midnight. He's the mind behind the beloved Java Man detective series, blended suspense, humor, and humanity in every case he writes. Randy's passion for storytelling runs deep. He reminds us that behind every twist and every clue lies a piece of the human heart. So settle in with your cup, open your mind, and join us for an evening of mystery, imagination, and the true arts of storytelling. Let me get Randy in here and let's spill some tea. Welcome, Randy.
Good evening. How are you?
I am good. And yourself?
Doing well here in Colorado. It's a warm day today.
So, Randy, let's go and start off really young. I'm going to take you back to the little boy. Who was Randy as a little guy, and who's Randy now?
Well, I always had an active imagination, talking about one of the words that I gave you before. As a child, I had those little army soldiers and little cowboys and Indian plastic soldiers I used to play with when I was a youngster. I always had stories and ideas in my mind. And as I got older, I watching TV and stuff, I'd sometimes imagine uh, writing my own TV shows, and maybe I'd be an actor in it and all that. And went on from there. So I always had that imaginative ideas running through my head constantly. And that hasn't changed much as I've gotten older. I still have a lot of that stuff. I kind of put it aside after I got married. When I got married kind of late in life, like in my late 30s, had a child and all those things. I used to write poetry and all those other things, and got married, had a child, and all those things. And as I got older, I got back into writing, and that's kind of been my mostly retirement type of thing. I write stories because they sometimes kind of haunt me. They kind of just always running around in my head. And
all those little voices running around, right?
Yeah, I usually have to get them out of my head and get them down on paper. I always find it very therapeutic to write.
So how old were you when you wrote your first book?
Well, the first book I ever wrote, I was in my mid-20s. I wrote 3 books in another series which never saw the light of day, way before. It's like in the 80s. I even did a lot of them on a manual typewriter. I still have those old papers filed away in a filing cabinet here. And a whole series about a spy. And I thought they were good at the time. You read them now, and I don't think they're as well. But I was probably in my 20s when I wrote those, and I'm in my mid-60s now. So a long time ago. And I wrote a lot of poetry before that, and I still have a lot of the poetry, song lyrics, all that. As I tell people, I kind of wrote to deal with teenage angst. Now I write to deal with middle-aged angst.
So you said poetry. What kind of poetry do you write?
Well, when I was in high school, when I did it, it was kind of the little bit of love stuff, the girl that I couldn't get, and I wrote some of that stuff. And then, whatever the political times were, sometimes I would write, War and Peace. I was a big John Lennon fan. John Lennon was, shot, and I kind of had a little bit of a anti-gun anthem, which kind of goes against what I write these days, because I do have guns in my books. But those are the things that I wrote, and sometimes I gave the poetry to the girls. It didn't usually work out too well for me after at the time, at least. So
Randy, what got you into writing mysteries?
So I always loved mysteries. I read Ian Fleming, James Bond books, spy thrillers, mystery. I mean, there's a little mystery in there, but they're more thrillers. And then I found Robert B. Parker and his Spencer series. Later on, Jesse Stone, Sonny Randall. I always enjoyed those books. I always liked his writing style. It was very simplistic, and it was always interesting hearing interviews with him. He says, I just sat down and wrote. I never edited anything. I just wrote it all out, sent it to my publisher and my editors, and they took it from there. It was just very basic, and I don't know how much they changed on it. They said, they took care of the grammar and stuff for him, but he would just sit down and write. And I always liked those worlds that you create. And I always thought them fascinating. Robert Ludlum, I enjoyed his books as well. Now I read Michael Connelly and Lee Child, but I've always liked those mystery, the tough guys who sometimes are tough and sometimes they're not so tough.
So we have a question that came in. Which of your characters feels like an alter ego for you, and why?
So everyone always asks me about Jarvis Mann, because Jarvis Mann was my private eye, written in first person. And, everyone goes, is Jarvis Mann you? And I say, well, a lot of the way he talks and his snarky attitude, which is another one of the words that I gave you as well, that is all me. I wish I was as tough as he was. I wish I was as good a ladies' man as he was. which my wife would attest to, and all that. So, but really, Jarvis is one, and I have 10 books with number 11 I was actually working on today, which hoping to have the first draft done by the end of the year. But Jarvis is the one that I hold dear to my heart and still enjoy writing him because he's a lot of fun to write. The stories and his attitude towards things, and I always likened him. If you ever watched the old MASH TV show,
Yes.
Alan Alda, Hawkeye period, he would in the most worst circumstances, people dying and bleeding and shot up and everything, and he would crack jokes. That was how he dealt with the stresses of the situation. And Jarvis is kind of like that. He could be getting his butt kicked and he'll still be cracking jokes. And that's me. I have a tendency to throw jokes out there in the worst possible situations. And sometimes it got me in trouble a lot of times, especially at work and stuff sometimes. So
let's get into that word snarky, because you gave me that word to describe yourself. And you describe Jarvis as snarky. So what is it about snarky?
I think it's just the attitude of how to deal with things when someone is mad at you or yelling at you or wants to kick your butt. Sometimes you throw out those jokes or humor to throw them off their game a lot of times. Sometimes they don't know how. You throw a joke at someone, they're like, they don't know how to react.
Where did that come from?
Yeah, I'm like, huh? What? And that's kind of always been my, sometimes people, they're feeling down. I would break jokes. And my daughter always tells me, she goes, Dad, you're not funny anymore. I've heard all your jokes. So, but anytime I make her laugh, I say, see, I found a new one that you hadn't heard yet. So, but I've always enjoyed that attitude to have. And sometimes it's right to do, and sometimes it's not. But I think it's the way to keep, at least me, sane in those really terrible situations sometimes,
So you're that bad joke daddy that comes in, to lighten up the mood, but you're actually like, Dad, not now.
Yes, my daughter says you are the poster child for dad jokes, right? So I have a lot of them. She's always says that's a dad joke, and which I had never heard that term until she had said it. Oh, okay. I guess maybe I should have trademarked that so I could make money off of it, right?
Joke. Randy, I'm going to bring up your book that we're going to talk about tonight, and it's called Justice for the Forgotten, the Steve Wills Cold Mystery. Let's bring up that book. And for all my audio listeners out there, Randy, if you'd like to talk about the cover and all of that and how it came about.
Sure. So I had just finished a previous series. This is a whole new series. This is book 1. And the idea kind of came from my wife. So I had just finished my Divine Devil series, which was a big award-winning series. And I wanted to start a new series. And she goes, well, what about someone who goes to state parks and solves murders? And I thought, well, rides and has a motorhome and stuff. I said, well, that seems a little convenient that every time you go to the state park, it's always a murder, just like on TV, the Murder, She Wrote, that little town, and there's someone always dropping dead every week. So, but I kind of took that idea and kind of fleshed it out and stuff. And then I did the Citizens Police Academy here in Westminster, Colorado, which I recommend anyone if you have a Citizens Police Academy, it's a great thing to do in your city or even maybe a city nearby, because you learn so much about what they go through. And I did a ride along with an officer and kind of heard his frustrations. And so I kind of based this a little bit on what I learned there. And he's a retired Westminster police officer who was the youngest police officer on the force, retires in his mid-40s. His wife had just passed away, and they were going to travel in an RV to see the world retirement times. Well, she passed away. So he decided to sell his house, buy an RV, and travel. And he writes a blog. And in the blog, he kind of just, that's kind of his therapy. He kind of writes down things that have happened to him and everything else. And people discover the blog, and this first couple, a husband and a wife, contact him through the blog and say, would you be willing to look at a case where my son was killed? Our son was killed 3 years ago, and it was never solved. And so he kind of digs into it deeply and kind of looks into it a little bit reluctantly, but he says, I'll look into it and see. And, you know, can't quite get the police life out of his blood, even though he's retired. And he also has a Belgian Malinois canine, trained canine that he worked with on the police force in Westminster, because he was part of the canine unit as well. And the canine was hurt, and so they didn't want to retire him. So they gave him the dog when he retired as well, to take care of, since they had created a bond, and his name is Kogel. So the young man, the Justice for the Forgotten title came from, this young man has kind of been forgotten other than his family. And there's a lot of cold cases like that have never been solved. There's tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of. And so the Lady Justice there is in the picture, and the picture is the young man. And my cover artist, he's a Hispanic man, and my cover artist who does the cover, she's Hispanic as well. And she said, well, the candle is very much a part of when there's like a funeral and stuff, they do that, and they have the beads there and all that. And I thought, great, that sounds like a wonderful picture or cover idea. So we kind of tweaked it a little bit here and there. And I wanted it to just kind of stand out a little bit. And then we have the Steel Wheels logo in there, which has the dog Kogel in there, and and it's book 1, but there'll be more, which I even have tattooed. Let's see if I can get my camera here.
Oh,
I even
nice
tattooed
one.
it on my arm, which, you know, dedicated authors, you do what you can to. But anyway, he digs into this. He drives in the motorhome. He digs into it. He also drives a motorcycle with a sidecar, so the dog can ride with him, and digs into the case and finds out that the police department down there had kind of mucked it up. And then there's a fictional town outside of there called Real Celeste, which is run by a cult, which we've had, you know, some cults here in Colorado that have had some caused some problems at times. And he finds out, digs in deeper and finds out a little bit of a conspiracy of what's going on. And it's a very intense book, and there's chapters throughout the book that have blog. So every 4 or 5 chapters, there's a blog piece, and the blog piece sometimes will deal with what the previous chapter was, or maybe what the next chapter is. And the blog is written in first person. The rest of the book is written in third person. So it kind of gives you a sense of Donnie and how he is and what he's like, and what he's dealt with through his life as a police officer, and a little bit about his personal life. There's a blog chapters in there about his daughter, and who's, you know, an adult now, about the same age as my daughter. So, you know, as they say, write what you know. And but I really felt like this was one of the strongest, a little bit spiritual too. You know, when someone dies, you kind of look back on your life, and a little bit of, you know, God and all those things, which I'm not necessarily a real spiritual person, but I felt like this character needed that as part of his healing process, and a lot of healing going on for Donnie. And Kogel is kind of a little bit, he's a work dog, he's a canine, but he's a little bit of a therapy dog for him too, because it's become his companion to help him get through his grief and help him deal with the bad guys.
So we have a question that came in for you, Randy, and it says, can you share a moment when a real life experience unexpectedly inspired a mystery in your book?
Good question. I would say in my Jarvis Man series, and there've probably been a few, but Dead Man Code deals with a computer engineer who's murdered. And I worked in the IT world, and I always wanted to kind of bring the IT world into a mystery as well. And Jarvis is not very smart when it comes to IT. So And I actually worked a chapter in there where my daughter was part of the Cyber Patriots, if anyone knows what
Oh,
Cyber Patriots is, but that's a part of STEM, and they do cybersecurity and they have contests and stuff. And her teacher was, I wrote her teacher into the book to help school Jarvis on technology because he didn't understand it while he's trying to interview this. So, and he actually read the chapter to his class. I changed his name. He read the chapter to his class, and everybody in the class was like, "Oh man, he figured you out perfectly. He's got that character is absolutely you." But that kind of inspired me, being in the IT world, to bring that in, and it got into computer theft and identity theft, and we trust so much stuff that we throw out on the internet, and they say it's secure and it's encrypted and stuff, but is it really? You get a little lock icon up in the corner, but could that be misleading and all that? And that kind of became the crux of the story, as this company was running this equipment, but they were actually stealing people's information in the process. So that was that one really came from a lot of real world experience of myself that I dealt with in the IT world.
well,
And the
Randy, I
Russians
think,
and the Chinese were involved too, which a lot of
right.
hackers over there.
And Randy, I think storytelling has a way of bringing awareness to what you just mentioned, like cyber, bullying and stuff like that, and identity theft and stuff like that. Through these books that you're writing, you're bringing awareness as well because people are reading it and they're like, I wonder if it's real. I wonder if it's not. You know, have you ever had somebody read your book and say, "Is this based on a true story?"
People ask me that. They also ask me if any of the characters are people I know. And I think, as most authors, we do steal things from people, but we don't. And in this case, the teacher, it was him, but I changed his name. And but his class, he knew it was him, and he was okay with that and stuff. And it was all right with him. But I think we all borrow a little bit from people we see. I'm always observing, and I think authors do that a lot. We see people all the time, so I tell people, beware. If there's an author nearby, the way you're acting might end up in a book someday, especially if you're acting out or being bad or whatever. And I've even had people who I'll ask, and I say, would you like, I could put a character about you in the book, but I would just use your name. And it was always interesting to ask people, because I'm always looking for unique names, because you can only use John and Bill and Mary.
Yeah, it gets a little stale, right?
Yeah, so you're always looking. So if someone comes up and I know the name, oh, that's a great name, and I'll write it down. And I says, well, if you were a character in a book, would you want to be a good person or a bad person? Or you'd be amazed how many people want to be the bad person a lot.
I want to be a bad person. Like, I don't want to be.
Yeah, they're just like, oh yeah, make me evil. I'd really go for that. So
Crazy bad tea lady.
well, I'll remember that. I may have to have a Miss Liz in one of my stories, right?
You just never know where she'll take you, right?
That's right.
The journeys of that tea. If you could turn one of your series into a movie or a film, which one would it be, Randy?
Probably the Divine Devil series, and that was, I won two pretty big awards for the first two books in that series, and it's a very intense thriller series. I think it would be great. And I've had several people look at it, and I have. I'll grab here. I'll just look at it. These are proof versions and stuff, but a lot of people, I don't know if you can see, but a lot of people go, is that Shamar Moore from SWAT on there on the cover? Because black man, bald head and everything. He's got a goatee and all that. And it was, it was like, well, if I could get him to do the show, I'd be thrilled. But I would think that would be a good one, especially, or like, I don't know about a movie, but I would think, just like the Reacher series or the Bosch series, I think they come across much better on these 8-10 episode series. But I'd love to do it. It would be interesting to see, because their interpretation as well of what you wrote.
And have you ever had feedback that ever influenced you to continue a series or characters?
Well, it's interesting because when I ended the Divine Devils series, I had one of the ladies came up to one of the events I did, and she points at me. She goes, "I'm mad at you."
Oh,
I go, "What did I do? What did I do?" And she goes, "You ended the Divine Devils series. I didn't want it to end." And I felt like at the time it was I ended it, and I wanted to end it because I wanted to write something else. And I says, "Well, you never know. Maybe I'll write something else." And I've had some of the characters from that series show up in the Jarvis Mann series, so as well. So I've kind of crossed over their worlds. I even wrote a little short story that's only on my website where I have Hunter Devine from the Divine Devils and Jarvis Mann, who owns a bar now. They meet in Denver in just out of the blue. He's at the bar and they're talking and they just kind of meet. It's just like a little connection thing there, which then I use later on in the stories. But that was one of the times when they're like, "Oh, I wish," you know. The other thing that people tell me, I hear all the time, is you don't write your books fast enough. Because they want me to write faster, and I'm like, well, it's you want to get it right. I could probably turn out a lot of crap really quick, but these are not Harlequin romances where it's pretty much a formula type of story, and I'm trying not to repeat myself. So I do hear that from time to time, that they wish I could write faster. So I just go back and keep rereading, all the time, and tell all your friends.
so how do you come up with the characters of the series? Because you have the detective, private detective, Divine Devils, and then the Steel Wheel Cold Mysteries. How did you come up with all of the different series?
So, well, Jarvis was the first one, and I had actually written that. You were talking about my first books I wrote. I actually wrote a short story called The Case of the Missing Bubblegum Card back in the 80s.
The bubblegum card.
Yeah. And that shows you my age. People say, well, bubblegum card. Why do you call it bubblegum card? They're baseball cards. Well, in my day, we called them bubblegum cards because they always came in the package with that horrible stick of bubblegum, which was just nasty. That was
really tough after a while.
Yeah, that's what we called them then, bubblegum cards. They were baseball cards. But so I wrote that and then put it away and never wrote it. And my wife read it and she goes, "Oh, that's really good." And had a couple other people says, "Well, he would make that private eye in that series would make a good private eye in an actual series." And that's the one now that I'm up to book 11, Jarvis Mann. But I always wanted to, the tough and snarky, his love life's a bit of a mess, the classic, the Philip Marlowe, all those classic hard-boiled private eyes. Make him a little bit different. He's very imperfect. He screws up. I have people saying he's not a very good private eye. And I go, I wrote him that way on purpose. He's gotten better over time with experience, but nobody comes out of the gate, being excellent. They screw up a lot. And then Hunter Devine, I wanted a character who was pretty broken. He's a former U.S. Marshal, lost his job, which is a thread that runs through that whole 4-book series on why he lost his job. A little bit of a conspiracy. He's down on his luck, drinks a lot, sleeps around. And an old girlfriend of his calls him about her two kids and wants to, someone's trying to kidnap him. And that kind of helps get him out of the gutter, so to speak. But I wanted that man. I wanted to see that broken man and him trying to pick himself up. And then he gets the opportunity to try to clear his name. And then the police officer, which I already talked about, that it's just the frustration of being a police officer and deciding to retire and move on with his life after his wife, and then still can't quite get it out of his blood, but he's not having to deal with the bureaucracy. I even brought that up in the book a couple of times. It's like the woman that he teams up with in the book, she tells him, it says, you don't have the same rules you had as a police officer you have to follow now. You can kind of work outside the lines. And that was tough for him to do because he always had that structure of being a police officer and the rules. And finally, by the end of the book, he's like, okay, yeah, I definitely, if I'm going to win this, if I'm going to defeat these people, I've got to go outside the lines a little bit and to stop them, because they certainly don't care about the rules and the law.
So we had a question that came in for you, Randy, and it says, what part of the writing process excites you the most? Plotting, drafting, or revising?
Yeah, editing and stuff. So I'm a pantser. I don't outline at all. I make some notes while I'm writing, and I do keep track of characters and stuff, but I just sit down and write. I always start with a basic idea. Sometimes I start with a title, like my book, The Front Range Butcher. That I started with that title, and The Front Range Butcher, a serial killer, and I wrote it from there. And so that whole process, the whole writing, actually sitting down and writing process is pretty good. I will say editing is not my favorite at all, especially when I send it to my editor and she sends it back and I see all the red and I'm going, oh my gosh, every time I send it to her, I think this is pretty good. I don't think it should need much. And she sends it back to me and it's like, oh my gosh, so much. And then you start going through it and you go, ah. But the actual sitting down and writing is what I enjoy, because it really comes off the top of my head. I sit down with that idea with the keyboard in front of me, and I just start typing, and it flows out of me in streaks. I'm not one of those that writes every day. I don't have strict rules. So I got to write something every day. I have to feel the inspiration. Like a few weeks ago, I was kind of stuck on my latest book, so I started writing the next Steel Wheels mystery book a little bit. And then, boom. And I've written 50,000 words in the last couple of weeks. So it just flow, and I'm getting close to where that first draft will be done. So it all comes out of me all at once. But that part is what I enjoy the most. The editing, not so much.
So Randy, what's the secret sauce for your suspense in your books?
The secret sauce. Well, good question. I think, and I talked about this in one of my newsletters, really, I really think the characters are the biggest thing. And I talked about this. It says you can have a good story, but if you got really bad characters, it doesn't hold together. Now, they work hand in hand. You obviously have to have a bit of a plot with your character as well. But I think the characters are the biggest thing. And I do spend a lot of time thinking about the characters and their individual traits and aspects about them, and what makes them that person. And like in my Divine, it's funny because I talk about this in my audiobook producer who did the first two Divine Devils. I had in that first book, I have 50 or 60 different characters. Not all of them were big characters, but there was a lot of them in there. Some had very small parts. But I'm always thinking a lot of times about that, and I feel I like to have a lot of diverse characters as well. I mean, I have a lot of African American, Black, Indian, Chinese, Asian. I have a Hawaiian character in the Divine Devils, all that, gay characters. I mean, I really have a lot of diverse characters in my stories. And I think that to me is the most important thing in the book. And then of course you build the story around them as well. And there's a little difference. Thrillers, really, you don't have a lot of lag. There's a lot, it's like you're going 100 miles an hour. Occasionally you're slowing down a little bit, but then you're picking right up again. There isn't a lot of slow swap, where The Private Eye is a little more of a procedural type of series that, he's clues and interviewing people and all that. And I always enjoy that. And for me, that was the other thing too, is I always feel like I'm discovering the clues to the case along with the character. That's part of the pantser thing, where I'm sitting there, I'm Jarvis, and I'm out there and I'm looking at the case, seeing it for the first time. I don't have a lot of things figured out until I go to that point in the book and I go, oh yeah, there it is right there. So, which I find fun. Sometimes you get yourself into a hole you can't get out of and write yourself into a corner, but it's still, I still like that part of it. And I think that to me, the secret sauce, though, answered your question long way around, characters are still the biggest thing for me in the stories, and they have to carry the weight of the book.
So Randy, how do you keep your reader engaged to the last page?
Good question. I think and you keep the story moving, and my editor does this a lot. She goes, "This doesn't advance the story. You need to cut this out." And I trust her vision sometime on that. And again, the procedural stuff, there is a little more. Sometimes you're going to have a little bit of lag in there, but you're coming to that conclusion. The thrillers, though, really, they're usually very much at a breakneck pace all the time. But I think, yes, I think that I trust my editor a lot of times when it comes to that too. When she sits there and says, "This doesn't advance the story," and take it out. And sometimes she's had entire chapters, and sometimes I say, "Nope, I need that chapter later." She says, "Well, you've already done this." I said, "Not really. I think it's important part of the story here, so I'm going to keep it in there, but I might pare it down some so it's maybe not quite as lengthy."
Well, I guess by doing suspense books, right, you got to keep people on edge and let them know that there's a book coming, another one coming, right?
Right, and maybe that was why the lady was mad at me after the fourth book, saying, "I don't want it to end," but I kind of wrapped it all up. Especially the backstory of why Hunter Devine lost his job gets resolved in the fourth and final book in a rather dramatic fashion, I will say, and I won't give spoilers, but I always tell everyone, read the book. But yeah, you do need to bring them on. And sometimes in my Jarvis books, there are little things at the end of the book that teases the next book. So it hasn't always been true. I try to write the Private Eye series, as standalones, though you do see the evolution of character. And I tell people a lot of time, you can start in the middle if you want. You're not going to be lost. I explain things. If the character shows up, you'll know why. You might get some spoilers reading a later book when you go back to the early book. You don't see the evolution of the character, but they're written to be standalones. Like the thriller series, those I always say need to be read in order. We'll see about the Justice series, since I've only have one book so far. That's easy to start with just the one, but yes, you do want to tease them from time to time, and I have done that in a few books. I don't try to. The book I wrote before the one I'm working on now, called Murder by 100 Cuts, which was dealing with the serial killer, the trial of the serial killer, which was in the Front Range Butcher. My editor wanted me to stretch it into 2 books, and I thought I didn't really want to have a cliffhanger at the end of the book to lead into the next book. I wanted to resolve it in that book. And so I did, because I didn't feel like I had enough to do 2 separate books.
So, Randy, I want to get into your tea because time is just flying over here. You gave me imaginative, independent, logical, or realist. Why did you give me those words? You gave a little bit at the beginning of the show about the imaginative, but why the other words?
Right. So the independent, I've always been very independent. I didn't get married until I was in my late 30s. So I kind of
But you had fun, right?
I enjoyed being single, and I learned how to take care of myself and, cook my own food and do my own laundry and all those things. I wasn't reliant on anyone to do that. And I'm still that way today. Even though I'm married, I still do a lot of those things myself. I still cook. I still do laundry. I still do those things. So I've always liked that independence myself, making my own decisions. I'm an independent author. People talk about, well, why didn't you go out and try to get a publisher or get an agent, which most of the time you have to have an agent these days before you can get a publisher. Not 100%, but that's pretty common. And I just didn't have the patience. And I also didn't really want other people telling me what my cover would look like and what, oh, well, that story doesn't work and you should change that. I listen to my editors and I do listen to other people, but I always wanted to be in control of those things. I didn't want to go to a publisher and then have them go out of business as well. And then you got to fight to get all your stuff back, which happens to a lot of authors. I interview, I have my own podcast as well, and I interview a lot of authors, and they talk about that all the time. Well, the fight, they can't get the covers back. They eventually get the books back, but sometimes that's a real struggle and stuff. So I always love that independence. And then what I was saying, logical. I've always been logical to a fault. My wife sits there and says, "You think too logically all the time." But I see something that's happening in the world, and I just logically think, why does that happen? It doesn't make sense to me. Why should someone be successful while other people fail? I've just always been that way, and in a realist understanding that, yeah, it does happen that way, but it kind of sucks. But I've just always looked at it, and she looks at me and goes, you think too logically sometimes. And so that's kind of what when you were asking those questions, I was like, yeah, those would probably be the three things that make me who I am.
Well, and that's the tea. That's the tea that we serve in this house, right? Is we serve you. We serve who you are. I can't tell you what your tea is. I can't tell you who you are. And that's why I have all my guests here, to get to know who you guys are. I'm going to take you down a rabbit hole that you probably are amazed that I found this. But I went to your website and I was like, oh my God, I have to talk about this. Anybody that knows Miss Liz loves classic cars.
Oh, yeah.
You have incredible pictures of classic cars, Randy. What is it about classic cars that you love?
Well, Jarvis drives a '69 Mustang, Boss 302. But I've always liked those cars, and there's a lot of things I like. I'm amazed when someone, and we watch a lot of classic car shows, like Netflix, and them have all kinds. There's some of them, they're up in Canada there, that just, rust bucket cars. They turn them into these unbelievable vehicles. They're very expensive, and they sell them for $40,000-$50,000 a lot of times. But I'm always amazed at the work that goes into them. I know on my website there was a Corvette there, and I do a car show every year. I sell books at it, and I do really well at that car show. But I go to that show just because I get to see the cars as well, and then I sell some books. But there's like a 59 Corvette there that was this brownish bronze color, and I'm thinking, and every angle you look at that thing, it looks like a different color. It's just amazing to me, all the work involved, the guys out there polishing away. And I just think they're incredible pieces of work. The other thing that I really love about those cars sometimes is simplicity of the engines, though sometimes they put a more modern engine in there.
Yep.
And how much room there is in there to work on those engines. You buy a new car these days, there's like no room to slip your arm down in.
Right? Change the spark plug. It's like, where do I put my, how do you do that?
Yeah. I mean, we were looking at new cars a few years ago, and there was this Ford, and the battery's under this metal shelf here. And it's like, okay, I can change a battery. I can't even get that battery out of there where it's at, without removing 4 other things.
Yeah.
So I find they're amazing. I really love them, and it was great this year. I went there, and there was I think it was a Thunderbird, and this father was so proud. His 15-year-old daughter had restored it, and she did an incredible job. And I had to give her, a fist bump. Like, yes, oh man, that's amazing. I says, you got another project? She goes, yeah, we got another one here, and I'm thinking about doing as well. But just all the work and the love that goes into those cars that I really enjoy. And like I said, Jarvis's is not as in good a shape. It's been shot up a few times, and
he's been through a lot.
It's been through a lot, but it's still going. I think he's got like 300,000 miles on it and stuff. So,
well, it's a story behind the classic cars, right?
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
The craftsmanship that went into the old classic cars, we do not see that today. And it's like telling a story, right? The suspense of building that car. And I was just like, oh my God, yep, classic car. I'm bringing it out on Tea Time because if you want to take me out on a date, take me to a car show, because I love classic cars, guys. I'll be driving for a midnight drive or something, and I see a car and I'm like, oh, that's a nice one. It just stops me in my track. I'm a car junkie. I like old classic cars.
Well, over here in Broomfield, they had a craft fair, which I usually do, but I didn't do it this year. And they had a little car show there, and they had a guy there that had, if you know the movie Bullet, Steve McQueen and his Mustang he drove in there. This was an exact replica. And he had the movie poster on there and a little Steve McQueen doll and then a little miniature version of it. And that was a sweet car. You know, if I had the money, I'd be like, yeah, I'd buy them. But, you know, the problem is they are really expensive. I wish I had the skill to restore them too. But
And I love the title on the website, fun stuff, because it is fun stuff.
right. And I do that in my newsletter. Like my newsletter I was working on today. I'll be talking about the car show I just went to, and I'll have a few pictures there. And then I always point them there because, you know, it's, you got to do more than just, especially in your newsletters, you got to do more than just talk about your books and buy my book. You got to give them some stuff. I have a lot of gardening stuff on the fun stuff page as well, of flowers, pictures, things we've done at the house, our dogs, you know, all those things. So they're all good things, you know, that other people can relate to other than buying my book.
So Randy, do you like taking pictures for a hobby, or is it something that you really like to get into?
I enjoy, and I take a lot of pictures of people when they're buying my books. And sometimes I'm really bad about forgetting it. Someone buys a book, you know, like, you mind if I take a picture? And it might end up in the newsletter on the website and stuff. And sometimes I forget. But yeah, I'm not a, you know, someone who likes to, you know, oh yeah, I got to frame this perfectly and stuff. I'm kind of one of those, you know, take a shot. You know, the cameras on these phones these days are incredible.
Yeah.
And so I do take a lot of pictures and stuff. Enjoy it. There was one time when I had a nice 35 millimeter, and I thought, well, maybe I should be a photographer and do some of that. But just never really got it. But I love when I see something and I think it's beautiful or unique or whatever, you know, flowers, you know, bees flying on flowers and stuff. A lot of times I like to take pictures of those and look back on them. And I have some old, I mean, I still have some photo albums from way back that has pictures from in the mountains and stuff that years and years and years ago that they're starting to fade.
And that's what I like enjoying. Like when I do my research on my guests, and I found that I was just like, oh yes, we're getting that out on tea time. Like I was just like, we can talk about the book, but we're talking about the car. Like the cars are nice. I'm a Mustang girl. I love Mustang. I don't know what it is about the Mustang, but I love the Mustang and the Shelbys and Corvettes. Or, you know, like I just like the body of them.
Yeah. Well, in the classic muscle car, I mean, anytime you go to a car show, Mustangs and Camaros are probably the two most you see, and Corvettes are pretty common too. But those are the two big cars that people love. And I'm still looking for the exact car. I haven't found a full-size exact car that matches the one that Jarvis has. I actually found a model on eBay that is exactly like the 302 Boss. It's yellow with black stripes. Hood comes up and everything. And I actually have that at my table when I do events, which draws people over. A lot of people, you know, kids come over. A lot of guys, when I do the car show, I get all kinds of people. Are you selling that? Are you selling that? I said, no. But my private eye drives it. Do you like to read? You know, it's kind of one of those magnet things. But I think cars, especially men, and even women, there's a lot of women that come over and see the car too, but especially men, because a lot of men don't read, but I do get a lot of men who see that. And I go, well, what about reading? And so, well, you know, I haven't read for years, so maybe I'll try one of your books. So I feel like that's a good thing to maybe get some, maybe a little bit out of their comfort zone and trying something different. And then every now and then they come back to the car show the next year or one of the other events. Like I had one guy this year, he said, I bought the Divine Double series. I want the whole Jarvis Band series. And he was excited. So, but those are the things that help you connect with readers, you know, and I've always have a motorcycle model on my table too, because I also, Jarvis rides a Harley at times, and I have motorcycle riders in the other two series also.
So Randy, do you drive a motorcycle?
I do. I have a Spider these days. Oh. If you know what a Spider is, it's made up there in Canada. And 3 wheels, top of the line. I used to ride a 2-wheel motorcycle. Unfortunately, I was in a bad accident about 8 years ago. So happily survived. But it's a little hard for me to ride on 2 wheels. But that thing, I can ride that thing year round, other than if it's icy or snowy. It's got heated seats, handlebars, stereo. It's a 2-seater. My wife rides it. My daughter's even learned how to, got a license to ride it as well. But I've always enjoyed riding the bike, and I come from my mom was a big motorcycle rider. She rode 2 wheels and then had a couple of trikes before she passed away. And it's always in our blood. And I think my daughter is going to continue it. My wife loves riding too. So there's nothing quite like it other than people trying to run you off the road.
I like that you mentioned the Spider, because that's one that I'm attracted to, because
Yeah.
I'm like you, the 2 wheels. I've been hit on a bicycle, like riding a bike. So I'm very leery with 2 wheels.
Right.
The 3 wheels, I'm just like, I kind of like that. And it looks like it's got a good ride to it as well.
Yeah, it's very stable. It's definitely different than riding 2 wheels. It takes some adjustments. More like riding an ATV. Motorcycles, you lean, but you don't really lean as much when you're turning and all that. But so it took me a little while to get used to it, but I love it now, and it's great. It's got cruise control, so you're out on the highway, you can just set the cruise control, and I got a nice stereo and can listen while I ride, and I enjoy it. I still wear full gear though, even though I'm on 3. I still have a full helmet, and I still have heavy coat, just because I was wearing all of it when I had the accident, and thankfully I'd probably be dead otherwise. But I was in hospital for several weeks and had rehab and for about 6 months, and thankfully no major repercussions, other than I have a good sense of when the weather's turning bad, because I can feel it in my knee.
Well, I'm happy that you're okay. Randy, you mentioned you have a podcast, and I'd like to get other podcasts out there. Talk to us a little bit about your podcast and where people can find that.
Sure. So my podcast is called Bringing Life to Characters, and it's on YouTube. That's the best place to sign up and see it. I do stream it to my Facebook pages as well, but Facebook now won't let you keep things more than 30 days anymore. So thankfully they're all on YouTube. But I've had 49 episodes, and I've interviewed a lot of really well-known authors, and some are not as well-known, people I've met through the years, all the events. And basically we just talk about, their life, their journey, who inspired them as an author, have they been writing all their lives, the struggles of getting published for those who want to be traditionally published. And then I always ask the question towards the end of the show about what they do to bring life to their characters, which I always feel like is very important. And it's always interesting. Mark Stevens, who's a well-known noir author here in Colorado, and he I usually send him a list of questions in advance, and I say, well, I'm going to veer off of these questions, but we'll probably do this. But a lot of times I'm very free form. But that question's in there, and he goes, I really appreciate that question, because I think it was so good. And he had this big long list he had written out on paper that he was reading off about what he looks for, what he tries to do to bring life to characters. And I thought that was really neat when he did that. So, but it's a fun show, and I just did it just for my own, to get to talk to people, because I like talking one-on-one with people about books and being an author and all those things. And it gives me good feedback on sometimes the things I'm doing wrong as well. Or right. Yeah.
Well, I think it's really good for the engagement, right, between people like that. And that's what I enjoy about my podcast, is getting to meet the incredible people and learning from them and understanding why they write what they write, or why they have the service, or why they have the program, or, and a lot of it has to go with our younger selves, like speakers were probably a silent child, weren't allowed to speak. Now they're speaking. For myself, I was a mouse. Like everybody that back home, they're like, Liz, what happened to you? You have a like, I'm a lion now. Like I kick ass now, right? Where before I was like, is it okay if I ask you that? Now I'm just like, I'm just gonna ask you, and you can just tell me, no, I'm not gonna answer that. Like,
Yeah, it's just on my show, and it's kind of like what we're doing here. It's really just a conversation about books, and it kind of just goes where it goes. But it's always a lot of fun, and I enjoy it. And like I said, I've had a lot of well-known authors, and I've had some that aren't quite as well-known as well, and I plan on continuing to do it. And I do mine about 3 times a month, I think it is, once a week. I take a week off every now and then, so my voice doesn't give out on me for talking too much.
Oh, is that what I need to do so my voice doesn't cut out?
Well, you're
Slow
doing a
it down,
couple a
girl.
day there, so yeah, I'm sure by the end of the second one, you're like,
At the end of the night, well, I do 4 a week, so yeah.
yeah, I'm sure.
I want to know, Randy, if you had a choice for a dream actor to play any of your lead detectives on screen, who would you pick?
Yeah, so I had mentioned Shamir Moore, people had talked about for Hunter Devine. The Jarvis Man series, people ask me that all the time, and I've always said Bradley Cooper or Chris Pine would be perfect as Jarvis, if you don't know who both those are, because they do humor and they do serious. They can do both. Hunter Devine as well. Denzel Washington would be perfect, but he's getting a little too old. So even though he just did the Equalizer movie, and he's whatever, like it's almost 70 now. So it's like, but yeah, those guys would be, I think, perfect. So if anyone's got connections to them out there, other than Bradley Cooper's, he's a Philadelphia Eagles fan. I would have to hold that against him. So.
And Randy, what do you hope the readers take away from your books beyond the thrill of solving the mystery?
I think being entertained and enjoying the characters is the biggest thing for me. And that's where I get the most satisfaction. When people read a story and they say, oh my gosh, I couldn't put it down. I just kept reading and reading and reading and reading. And those are the things that I enjoy the most. But entertaining them and creating characters that people will remember.
Entertainment goes a long way when you're reading suspense, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can't be too bored with suspense, but you got to keep coming up with new ideas all the time too. So you can't solve the murder the same way every week or every year, or however often. I usually get about a book, sometimes 2 out a year, but it's how these guys do these weekly TV shows and come up with these. I mean, a lot of times they're just recycling some of the same ideas over and over again, but.
Have you ever are you ever going to recycle any of your books?
Recycle them as in
create a new plot, a new twist? Are you going to maybe put the 3 series together somehow?
I haven't thought about that. I have had a little crossover between the Divine Devils and Jarvis Man, just a character to 2 showing up, and I've had Jarvis's lawyer show up in the Divine Devil series. I have not had any crossover into the new book yet, though I have considered it. Time will tell. Doing a mashup with everybody in one book might be interesting, though that would be a lot of people, because the Divine Devils, there's 5 people in the Divine Devils team. Jarvis is kind of by himself, but he's had a few frenemies through the years that have shown up in the books. So would be a whole lot of characters to capture. I always think of the Marvel movies sometimes where, they have like the Avenger, Endgame and all them. It's like there's just too many. There's so many characters there, but there's just too many to keep track of, and stuff. So it gets a little bit confusing. But there will probably still be a little bit of crossover, especially into the Jarvis series from the old Divine Devils.
And Randy, on your website it says Jarvis, Hunter, and a beer. Check it out.
That's the short story I said where Jarvis and Hunter Devine meet in Jarvis's bar, the Private Eye Tavern.
So they do meet.
They do meet in that story over a beer. Very short. It's a very short story, and that's where Jarvis has the introduction to Hunter, and then later in the series, he actually contacts someone who's part of the Divine Devils team, and brings him on to help him with a case or 2. So yes, there is a little crossover in that short story. That was a fun short story that I wrote. And I have another short story where Jarvis, that's an anthology that's on my website as well. It's part of a Wild Deadwood Reads historical, where Jarvis goes to Deadwood to find a runaway girl, and he gets thrown back in time.
So Randy, let's get everybody over to that website. If you want to spell it out for the audio listeners and for the people watching on video, where can they get you?
Sure. It's RWEIR, author, AUTHOR.com. And I have some old website. I have an old website out there, but it's all redirected to the new one. But that's the newest website that which I actually did myself, which was a lot of work, and trying to keep it made up. But yes, rweirauthor.com is my website, and you can find all my content. My newsletter stuff is there under the blog page, and I do have a store there where people can buy signed paperbacks, which I sign myself and mail myself. So you get my fingerprints all over it.
And you also get a nice logo bag too that I seen. So check out that website. Let's get everybody over to that website and check out Randy and all that good stuff. Well, Randy, thank you so much for joining me tonight on Tea Time. I'm just going to do a closing summary and we're going to wrap it up. So tonight's Tea Time with Randy Weir took us into the hearts of mystery writing, where imagination meets emotion and every character carries a bit of truth. Randy reminded us that stories don't just entertain, they connect us, heal us, and show us pieces of ourselves we might have forgotten. As we close this tea time, may we all keep chasing our own stories with curiosity, courage, and compassion. Until next time, keep your cups full, your hearts open, and your stories alive. I'll see everybody same time, same place, Tuesday and Thursday of next week, and we'll do this all over again.